When I entered the hospital room, the dim lighting and heavy silence immediately enveloped me in a strange, almost oppressive atmosphere. It was a familiar scene, a white room, scattered medical equipment, and the faint hum of the ventilation system. Yet there was something different that evening, something almost imperceptible. Mr. Jacobs, a patient I saw regularly for checkups, was there, sitting on the hospital bed, his eyes downcast. Usually smiling and serene, he looked particularly troubled this time, with a palpable tension that seemed to permeate the room. This unusual behavior caught my full attention and sparked a kind of curiosity mixed with worry. Trying to lighten the mood and make things more relaxed, I offered him a reassuring smile, but his reaction left me puzzled. "Is everything all right, Mr. Jacobs?" I asked softly, hoping to understand where this unusual concern was coming from. He glanced at me briefly before nodding with a slight smile, but his expression remained uneasy. As I helped him adjust his gown, my hand brushed against a thicker piece of fabric beneath his shirt, and a sudden discomfort seized me. My profession demands professionalism, but at that moment I felt a strange hesitation. I had to remind myself that I was there as a caregiver above all. Trying to refocus, I took a deep breath. "Let's settle in so the doctor can arrive soon," I said with an apparent calmness, hoping to dispel the growing tension. I tried to regain control of the situation and steer my mind away from what I had just noticed under his gown. But at that precise moment, as I adjusted the fabric again, it slipped slightly, revealing a fragment of skin and something indescribable beneath it. I froze, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort passing through me, unsure of how to react in this unusual situation. The door to the room suddenly opened, interrupting my thoughts, and a colleague entered discreetly. She took a quick look around the room, perhaps sensing the tense atmosphere. She immediately apologized upon seeing that we were in the middle of preparation, closing the door as quickly as she had entered, as if she didn't want to disrupt the intimacy of the moment. Internally, I felt relieved that she hadn't noticed what I had just seen, but that brief exchange seemed to intensify Mr. Jacobs' discomfort, who looked away again with a nervous smile. That barely perceptible smile unsettled me. Something in his gaze was making me more and more uneasy, and I had to admit that I no longer knew how to react. Composing myself, I finished the preparations, and as I prepared to leave the room to give him some peace, he brushed his hand against mine. The contact was so light, almost imperceptible, that I wasn't sure if it had been intentional. Was it simply an accident, or was he trying to send me a signal? My mind tried to understand the hidden message behind this gesture as the door opened again. This time it was the doctor who entered with his usual professionalism, seemingly unaffected by the tense atmosphere. I left the room, allowing the doctor to take over, a mixture of relief and confusion washing over me as I walked through the door. As I walked away, my mind was still disturbed by what had just happened. Even though I forced myself to concentrate on my other tasks, the image of Mr. Jacobs and that moment of tension in the hospital room remained etched in my mind. Later, as I was finishing my shift, a message from reception reached me. Apparently, Mr. Jacobs had requested that I be present at his next appointment. My heart quickened slightly as I read the note. Was it curiosity or nervousness? I wasn't sure, but I felt that this story would not end there. A few days later, our eyes met again, and this time I noticed something different in his gaze, like a more pronounced confidence. He greeted me with a slight, almost unsettling smile, and I felt a slight discomfort spread through me. "I've thought about you," he murmured in a low voice that seemed intended to stay between us. I did my best to remain professional, responding politely, but I couldn't ignore what that intense gaze stirred within me. Leaving the waiting room to fetch a file, I felt his gaze following me, piercing even through the walls. Every movement I made, every step I took, seemed strangely amplified. In my mind, I tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was simply anxiety related to his health condition. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel a troubling tension, a sensation I had rarely experienced in my professional life. I decided to ignore it, to keep my mind focused on my responsibilities. Yet, a part of me remained absorbed by this lingering discomfort. When I returned to the room, Mr. Jacobs had changed his attitude. This time, he stared at me with an insistence that made the atmosphere almost suffocating. I handed him a glass of water, trying to talk about lighter topics to ease the palpable tension between us. He accepted the glass, but his hand trembled slightly. "You're truly kind," he murmured, his words leaving a lasting impression. "Few people take the time to care for others as you do." This phrase, though sincere, added a new layer of complexity to the situation. Was it simply gratitude, or was there a hidden depth in his message? At that moment, an uncomfortable silence settled between us. The room seemed to thicken around me, as if the air was charged with a secret I couldn't grasp. Every second that passed made this interaction increasingly strange. The door opened again, interrupting the moment. It was a staff member checking if everything was all right. Taking advantage of the interruption, I took a few steps back to discreetly leave the room and regain my composure. I breathed deeply in the hallway, trying to dispel this strange feeling that weighed on me. When I returned a few hours later for the afternoon routine check, I discovered that Mr. Jacobs had left a small card on the table in his room, addressed to me. Curious, I discreetly opened the card and read a message carefully written by hand. "Thank you for your kindness. Your presence soothes me even on my darkest days." These words, simple yet sincere, stirred a deep compassion within me, but also a mix of fear and emotion that I couldn't explain. Why this particular attention? What hidden meaning lay behind this message? In the days that followed, each interaction with him grew a bit more intense. Mr. Jacobs seemed to constantly seek opportunities to prolong our conversations. He spoke about his memories, his regrets, things he had never had the chance to tell anyone. His behavior was touching, but I felt it went beyond a simple conversation between a patient and a caregiver. His gaze, so penetrating, left me perplexed and sparked a curiosity mixed with slight apprehension within me. Despite myself, I began to look forward to our exchanges with a certain anticipation, while reminding myself to keep a professional distance. One morning, as I was finishing my end-of-shift report, another card, more discreet this time, awaited me near the nurse's desk. It was a simple piece of paper, carefully folded, bearing the message.